things that we've been through. Every great leader aspires, that's official. Once a great student desired before dismissal, to be the spark to ignite the fire, to be continued.
And welcome to Share This, Conversations with Ruben. Today I have two special guests, two good friends of mine who I've known for quite some time. So I have Shaheewa Gelin, who is the CEO of the Broward County Black Chamber.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us today. And I have another good friend, mentor, entrepreneur, coach, all things, and Valerie Crawford. And thank you, Valerie, for being here.
Thank you, Ruben, for having me.
All right. So today we're going to be talking about advocacy. And this is a very important topic, especially in business. Not only just advocacy, but we're going to be talking about some other issues that are going to be gender specific as well, and really getting a feel about how, as leaders, as a female leader, as an advocate, and then the intersection between that and business. Yeah. So we want to make sure that we get a good understanding of how your roles were in the work that you do. So I'm so excited about you guys being here today, and I want to just talk about the first topic in terms of advocacy. I know that both of you are successful business people, but you are definitely staunch advocates. The last time we saw each other together, in fact, we were up in Tallahassee. I don't know if you remember that.
Okay,
yeah, we were in one of the state reps' offices where we met, and we were advocating for our particular causes. I know you do a lot of work in advocating for businesses that are members of your chamber. Absolutely. And I know you do a lot of advocacy for folks that you work with too, the consultants, your clients. So define advocacy in your particular role for me. What does it look like for you?
I would say advocacy for me, and with my background as a lawyer, it's kind of natural. Being in the courtroom and that adversarial process, you're representing someone, and usually someone who doesn't have a voice. And I brought those skills, the research that you have to do and be a good advocate, understanding the issues, to being a chamber president. So for me, advocacy is all about bringing voice, bringing color to the experiences, issues, and concerns of the folks that maybe sometimes the people in City Hall, the county, on a county commission, or on a state level, they're not understanding. They're not getting the details. They don't quite understand the needs or the concerns. And so it's my duty to not only speak up and shed some light on those issues, so that there can be solutions around what's happening, but also to bring other folks with me so they can hear those stories. So there are other folks in the room to understand this is the process. This is how you get others to understand what you're going through, but then also offer the solutions so that these issues can be resolved within the community. So for me, that looks like not only being a presence and a voice, but also bringing in other folks for collaboration. So there's a united front and a group kind of united voice with regard to what we're advocating for.
So I love what you're saying. You're talking about being clear in terms of your messaging, making sure that you have a team where you collaborate together because Absolutely. You're more impactful as far as those things.
Absolutely.
So those are key components of advocacy and the work that you do for the businesses that you advocate for, the members of your chambers. That's great. So what about you, Val?
It's interesting for me because I believe advocacy was kind of embedded into my DNA. I just remember in middle school advocating for things that students wanted or advocating for the students that did not get treated well. So for me, it's always been almost not an underdog, but feeling like everybody had a place. And that has always been how I've advocated. And then I was a member of the Miami-Dade Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors for many years.
Nice.
And because I was a successful entrepreneur, I always wanted people to have a place at the table. So my advocacy comes from realizing that this is all of our country, all of our spaces, and we each have a right to those spaces and advocating for those things that I believe in. And I'm a little bit different. I don't advocate for anything that I wouldn't die for. So it's that much embedded in me. That's why I say for me, advocacy is kind of DNA driven, because as a child of 12 years old, nobody has that consciousness about advocating for things that you're willing to die for. But I've always put my 100, and it's more from having and realizing that everybody has a space to be able to occupy the places that they belong. And so I fight for people who otherwise may not have a voice in those places.
Awesome. So you both seem to be very intentional about what you advocate for.
Absolutely.
And I think that's important. That's the only way that you can give your all. I want to ask you, in terms of advocacy, what role does advocacy play for a leader? Whether you're in corporate, whether you're in public, whether you're in your own home, your family, what role does advocacy play for leaders?
Well, it has to be. Here's the thing. If you're firm in who you are, if you're firm on where you want to be and to move other people in your ecosystem, and that could be in your family, it could be in your workspace. For me as an entrepreneur, I always advocated for my people to have healthy and whole lives. And so that goes down to what I was willing to pay them, what type of work I was willing to ask them to do, sometimes allowing them to have mental health time off to not do what I asked them to do. So advocacy for me is a holistic paradigm. But I do think that it has a role in every part of your aspect of life, because if not, why do you exist? If you're not advocating for something, why do you exist?
That's awesome.
I like that. It's so funny. When you asked the question, I wasn't sure how far to go back, but you went back to middle school. We about to go back to middle school.
Go back as far as you
I'm
want to
trying
go.
to be-
Go back as far as you want to go.
But I do agree with that. I think some, folks have it in them. And for me, I think with my life experiences, I never wanted to see anybody cornered or on the outside. So literally, it's so funny. We had this event where we were doing some mentoring at Miramar High School. And I said to them, I was that girl. Like, if I saw somebody being mistreated, I was in your face. You need something? What you need?
Still that girl.
Oh, right. Well, you know what?
Lady.
No,
You
that's
that
what I'm
lady.
saying.
You
Because it's
still that
inside.
lady.
I don't want to see anybody marginalized, made fun
Right.
of, made to feel less than who they are. Because everybody comes out of a home with their own experiences, their own hurts, pains,
Right.
different situations. So no one should ever be, crapped on. So I definitely was that girl. And I think I just didn't want to see people put down and made to feel helpless. Because we're all special. I, grew up in church. So I really firmly believe that we were all very uniquely made and we were all special. And I felt that from, at the time I was a child. So yeah, I broke up fights in middle school. I was that girl. Like, no, if you want some, you can get it. Don't pick on anybody that's, that you feel you can get over on. So I've always had that protector spirit. And, that's why, honestly, I felt that I would do well in law school. I felt that adversarial process would be really good for me and I could advocate for folks. And so I agree with you. I think that advocacy and speaking up really is what it is. Speaking up and being true to what you need, to what the people around you need, to what you're experiencing, and being able to express that fully. And that means that you have to allow the others around you to be able to do that as well. And unfortunately, some folks are made to feel like they don't have a voice.
Right.
And so I've never had a problem saying, well, I'll speak up for you. Who needs to know this? I'll be able to do that for you. So, because once again, we're all coming to the table with different life experiences, and folks at different points in their lives will feel comfortable, hopefully at some point, being their own advocate. But yeah, with family, advocating for family, quelling certain things that may come up in family instances. And that does, kind of boil over into how you show up as a leader when you are able to see the struggles that someone else may be going through, whether it's a coworker or, in my instance, chamber members. A lot of my chamber members, they're solopreneurs. So they're an army of one, powering their companies forward. And so I have to sit back and say, what's going on with you? Are you even advocate for yourself? What do you need? And those are the moments that I take great, great pride in, being able to slow down and get others to see what they need and advocate for themselves.
So I concur with everything that she's saying. If you know Shaheewa, you understand, or Valerie, they're both the same. Their history from growing up, just taking on challenges where most people are afraid.
Yeah.
They will advocate for others, putting others' interests sometimes before their very own. This is true to who they are, and this is why I respect them so much. Valerie, I saw you laughing over there. So is there experience that you want to share with us?
Well, I was laughing because when Shaheewa said she spoke up and took up for people who in school who were being beat up. Now, I will tell you, I've only had one fight in my life,
Right.
but that's because I could advocate with words
Right.
and didn't need to fight, but I would have been willing to fight. But I oftentimes was the one that was breaking up a fight, or the person who came to school who clothes were not as clean or did not smell as well. I was always the one positioning, advocating that people had a right to be there. Don't pick on people. And I just understood that. I mean, I'm the youngest of 9. And my mother in my household, I always say she was the matriarchal CEO. And so in our house, we just kind of advocated for the good of all.
Right.
So I always took that out when I went out into the street. So I never wanted anybody picked with and for what they could not control.
Yeah.
And so like Shaheewa, I was always the one either breaking up a fight or being willing to fight for somebody. Fortunately, I didn't have to.
Yeah.
But I was that person. That's why I was laughing when she said we're going to take it back to middle school and let's go, because that was me.
Well, it's appropriate. I mean, you guys are true to form. Everything that you described is what I've experienced with you all. I've seen you both in advocacy roles. I've seen you both looking out for your communities, making sure that if you have information that you can share that information, making sure that you can help build a community. And so that is so very important. But what really caught my attention is that the advocacy led you to leadership because you took charge. You know, one of the principles, it seems like, I mean, I'm a firm believer that leadership is not something that you can be given. It's something that you have to earn. And part of that is starting off with your advocacy pieces. It seems like it really shaped and molded you to who you are today. And then I love the fact that you talk about your family experiences, your school experiences, your life experiences, where you had moments to advocate for others. So what do you guys think about that? Are they one and the same in terms of how advocacy leads you to a place of leadership? Or how do you see it?
I would say
you don't have to agree.
No,
I just want you to say.
No. I say how we feel. I'm going to be honest. I think that kind of going back to what Valerie said, I always tell folks the core of who I am, as they say, you should know in your field, by the time you're 5, so many different things about yourself are formed. And then your environment or other experiences can, obviously influence who you are. But the core of who I've always been, for people who know me in middle school, high school, college, law school, they know who I am. That's the core of who I've always been. Because of my early childhood experiences, I'll say that. While I grew up in a family very much full of love and support, and, comfort, they did everything to make sure we had a good life. I didn't grow up with my biological father. And just to put it plain and simple, he was not good for, my mom. And so I saw her go through those struggles. And I think as a child, you can be put in positions where you feel helpless. And so you don't want other folks to feel helpless.
You don't ever want to feel that way or anyone else.
Or anyone else to feel
that way.
And so that's where really, if I'm really honest and looking back, that's where my engine and fire for sticking up for others and sticking up for myself really came from. I never wanted my voice to be suppressed. So I think it's having that strength to say, no, what I say matters and I matter. And I think also that faith journey, I was always in church. My aunt always had me in church. When my mom got, remarried, I was very active in church. And so that also formed the very core of who I was. So I think having that foundation in who you are is very important. So when you get out into the world and you see things happening, there are some instances, Ruben, where it's like nobody else is stepping up. Right. Something has to be done.
Right.
I know based on who I am and what I'm capable of, I can step up and do that. I can kind of fill that void. And I found that, I've acted individually and collectively in the past. And so, all my little steps led me to starting the chamber because I saw a void.
Right.
But looking at leadership from a space of, okay, well, I have a vision, I have this idea, but who else can we bring around? Who else can we gather and fold into the vision so that it truly is a community, a collective vision that benefits many, not just what am I doing and I'm important, but
So,
how can we collectively move together and make a difference?
so you touched on it a little, but I want to go a little bit deeper. So you started this chamber, right?
Correct.
So can you tell us, like, what was the impetus for that? What drove you to start this chamber in Broward, the Black Chamber?
Right. Well, two things, because I never expected to be doing anything business wise. I was going to be a lawyer, and then I wanted to go off to work for the UN. That was my thing. I had
Really?
very specific plans. I did a lot of persecutor and human rights abuser cases in my, as a young lawyer, and so I wanted to go to the UN. I wanted to work for USAID. I had all these argue cases at the
Had
Hague.
it mapped all out.
Oh yes, I did. Then I got married, right?
The game changer.
The game changer. I got married, and had a son, and my husband was in corporate America, always one of the few Black males in the office. And so I knew, based on he's very, very strong male, and when Black men show up strong, there's going to be issues in those settings. And so he ended up losing his job, and so the conversation was, well, I want to start my own business, and I knew he would. I knew
Right.
who I married. I said, well, look for a job still, but let's explore what this business means, and I got some questions for you. And he's like, okay, well, look, I'm going to do my research and come back and answer all those questions. So I saw someone with 10 years plus experience in go out and attempt to get government contracts and other opportunities, very experienced and capable. But I saw the roadblocks. So that was one thing where I said, how can I create something that will help folks? Because I saw the need for a solopreneur. Are they going to fight on their own?
Right.
Are they going to, if they lose a contract or a city or state government, are they going to knock on those big doors and wage a fight that will end up with a win or will make a difference? Will anybody listen to them? So once again, it was kind of that, I don't want people to feel helpless and alone. And because I saw our own experiences, we won a contract outright at the evaluation, but it took us 6 months to get the vote because internal dramas. Someone didn't want us to have a contract.
Yeah.
So I said to my husband, how many people would have walked away?
Right.
I said, you know what? I don't want to be blackballed, and it was intense pressure. I'm going to tell you. But that was one. And then two, I've always been very involved, community-wise in getting the vote out. And I organized like a 30-tour stop for this organization, a nonpartisan organization I was involved in, to talk about the ACA and then voting. I did a coalition, churches, fraternities, etc., that brought me into neighborhoods that I hadn't been in. Now, of course, there's blight and folks are living difficult lives.
Right.
But to go through all these neighborhoods across Broward County and see adult men on bicycles during the middle of the day. I'm looking at rubble and thinking about the children as they come out of their homes. What are they seeing? What kind of future are they going to have when they don't see business owners? They can't walk out and get a job or internship, see somebody doing something that looks like success that I was able to see. And I'm going to be honest with you, that hurt me very deeply because there are kids. And I did the research. At the time, 33% of Black children in Broward County were living in poverty. And that hit home to me because that spoke to lack of opportunity for their parents, lack of education, access. And so for me, I started to research what are the different ways that, folks in different areas have resolved, such problems, who's liaising with government, private sector for our Black businesses and community in Broward. And there was no one. And that really, those two things kind of came together. And I said, well, I think an answer is an entity that will bring together our folks who are doing fairly well to start to resolve some of our own problems. But obviously the advocacy piece was number one.
Right.
We need to show up in places so folks understand that we're here, we're not going anywhere, we contribute, right? We pay taxes, we contribute in other ways, and we have issues and concerns that need to be met.
Yeah. So, I mean, you definitely shared a very clear view of what brought you in, and it's very consistent with what you're talking about from grade school on up here. You saw a need. You were locked in, you were committed, you were very intentional about what you wanted to do and the purpose for why you wanted to do it. So that's something else. And one of the things we talk about when we talk about leadership, you need to be clear about your purpose. What is your driving motivation? if you're going to do something, be committed to it, be intentional about your move. So I love your story. It's consistent throughout. And so I just want to share with you that, you know, this, your role, you and Val's role, is so very pivotal because we have so many folks out there who are reticent when it comes down to speaking for themselves. They will be quiet, they'll stay in the background, they'll suffer in silence.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we see it, we see the hurt, we see the pain, and they're looking for someone to advocate for them. So I want to commend you for what
Thank
you've
you.
done. So Valerie, I'd love for you to tell me your journey as an entrepreneur, coach, as a mentor. She's my mentor, been my mentor for a while.
Nice.
So tell us about your journey.
Well, I want to go back to what you said, the continuum from advocacy to leadership.
Sure.
And I see that a little bit differently.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
But at least in my experience. So
Okay.
for me, advocacy, I think, was just kind of in my DNA. The creator said, my child, you need advocacy. No, I grew up in a very urban area, very similar to what we would call an impoverished, low poverty line. At points, my mother was on welfare. And I was the youngest of 9.
Right.
So if you don't learn how to advocate in a
Oh.
Right.
family of that size, and I had, 20, 30 nieces and, cousins, everybody coming over. So you learn to advocate for yourself in that type of household.
Right.
But also there was something in me as a child that I knew that wasn't my whole world. The 4 corners of where I lived wasn't my world. And I remember the first time distinctly that I advocated for myself. It was in 3rd grade. Miss Label gave us an assignment to write, who was your superhero? I wrote my mother.
Right.
She gave me an F on the paper because she said I didn't understand the assignment. And I said to her, I fully understood the assignment where everybody else had Superwoman,
Right.
Batgirl, all of those places. I said, well, the assignment was who was your superhero? My mother's my superhero.
Right.
So I literally had my mother come to the school to tell Miss Label that I understood the assignment. She didn't say it had to be a superhero
Right.
that was known. And she turned the paper into an A because it was a good paper, but she just didn't think that I understood the assignment.
Right.
So that's the first time, if you say, when was the first time you really advocated for yourself?
Right.
It was in Miss Label's class.
Okay.
Now, the continuum to leadership is a little different for me. You say that you think it's earned, and I would say for me it's a calling. And the reason why I say it's a calling from the creator is because I'm naturally shy. I'm naturally a geek. I'd rather be home. I'd rather be very much an introvert. But when I come out to the world, I come out as the vessel for the creator.
Right.
So, and when I do that, that's where my leadership style comes through because I'm representing something else, somebody else, something greater than me. So I present very much in the world as a leader, which I am,
Right.
but I come as a vessel. I don't come as me, Valerie, the person who'd rather be home, the introvert. So that's why I say for me, leadership is a calling upon my life. And then I ask the creator, what am I supposed to do as I lead? What am I supposed to do for the people who you've called me to lead? So I see it very much as a calling rather than as an earned thing.
Okay.
So, and maybe if it's earned through the creator, it's earned, but I see it as a calling.
That's good.
And one that I take very, very seriously.
That's good.
So that's how I see it.
So I appreciate you sharing that and providing your perspective of how leaderships evolve and that sort of thing. It's a calling, and you were called. I want to share with you all again that these 2 ladies are, one of the qualities that they have is that they can receive information, and they both do it with businesses. They can receive information and they can decipher through that information so that the folks that they work with as a consultant and as the CEO of the chamber, to make it clearer to them. And what happens is, we talk about access. One of the things in both their lives is that they create opportunities for access. One of the biggest contracts I had was because of a conversation, just a conversation that Val and I had. Just a conversation that led to an opportunity. And had I not had that conversation, I don't know if I would have taken that opportunity. I'm sure you've had moments like that as well, where folks, you share information,
Absolutely.
make it clearer to them, and then they're able to put their hat in for an opportunity, and they accomplish it, their goal. So Val, I'm gonna start with you now. Tell us about a success story, about something that you've done in business. You don't have to give us all of the sordid details, but how you were able to coach, guide, or be a consultant for someone, and they had a very successful experience.
Well, I'll start with myself.
Okay.
I've been an entrepreneur since 1989. I've had multiple businesses, and the one that flourished the most, I was in the fragrance business.
Right.
And it was during a time where websites and catalogs took a lot of money. So I got a $80,000 quote to do a website, a $30,000 quote to do a catalog. And what I ended up doing, I taught myself HTML coding from 11 to 7. And then I taught myself Microsoft Pro and everything else to do my own catalog.
Right.
And at the time, I was doing probably, I would say, marginally in the company, but we wanted to go growth. I had a
Right.
business partner, and there weren't many distributors in the fragrance business. And so what I said was, if I can teach myself the HTML coding, nobody's doing this. If I can get the catalog out, we can grow our business. And so what I ended up doing, that's how I grew the fragrance business. So we ended up being the direct distributor. And then I ended up bringing in containers from India and China, which really made us a mega distributor.
Wow.
But more than that, that's how I got into the consulting business, because when other people in my industry started to see the websites and the catalogs, they was like, who did it? I did it.
Right.
But in order for me to consult with them, I had to know all of the distributor suppliers. So that's when I learned about NDAs and other things. So
Right.
I started to consult with them rather than to do their catalogs.
Right.
So that's how I literally became a consultant in my own fragrance business. But we took that business into a multi-million-dollar business by being able to now do business in China and do business in India. So we became a super distributor. So then I had two businesses going at the same time. So that would be my personal success story. Just believing that, you know what, I can teach myself HTML coding. I had no idea. That's when you used to have to go in and change a color by a 6-digit code. Literally everything that you did on the website had to be done manually.
Right.
Yeah.
So that is what I would say. But that's the geek in me, that I knew that if I believed that I could do it, took the time to do it.
Mhm.
And then that's how I got into the consulting business, helping other people do that. I started off doing business plans, and really it's a mindset.
Mm.
So even with myself, what I realized, it wasn't the work. So I developed a concept called the Entrepreneurial Mindset 101,
Right.
because that's literally what I had to have, a belief that I could do this.
Mm.
But then I transferred this to other people, and that's how my consulting business grew, where I was able to help people grow businesses. Then I was on the board of the chamber. And so I look at it like this here. If I help one person who then could then help another person, then what I have done is really, in some ways, hit a generational mindset.
Right.
And that was kind of my goal. And so I would say I was my first success story. Although for me, success was always measured very simply.
How was it measured?
And that's, so I started out being an entrepreneur. And the thing for me in life was, from the time I was 13, will I always have enough to take care of my mother?
Mm.
Because that was my why.
Mhm.
My mother was my why. So it was always, as long as she needed and I could provide for her, that was my measure of success. It didn't matter
Right.
if I had $4.13 in the bank, and this happened one time.
Mm.
My mother needed something, and it was early in my business career. And once I gave her what I needed, I had $4.13 in the bank.
Mm.
And for a long time, I kept a picture of that. Because what I said was, only having $4.13 in the bank was still a measure of success, because my mother never knew that I was giving her everything but $4.13.
Wow.
Mm.
And what I tell people is, success is your why, not necessarily what's in your bank account.
Right.
And so I always look at myself, what drove me to be successful? And then I just parlay that to all of my clients in my consulting business. If you don't have a why, I don't want to work with you.
Right.
If your whole intent is to make money, I'm not the consultant for you.
Right.
If your whole intent is to be grandiose and have stuff and things, I'm not the consultant for you. And then the other thing too, I try to drive people to have an external why. What's bigger than you? What do you want to do for other people?
Mm.
Because what I found was, I could only have $4.13 in the bank, but I didn't know the next $40,000 contract was right around the corner.
That's right.
And that's why, for me, you have to have something that's bigger than you, that's outside of you, that's not driven by stuff and things.
That's
Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
We're going to talk about that because one of the things about being an entrepreneur is that you can't have a quitting spirit.
Right.
You cannot have a quitting spirit. So we're going to talk about that. But I want to segue into, or not so much segue, I want to really piggyback on this. So we've talked about how you guys started and, you know, your influence. But now I want to do something I think some folks are not comfortable with. So y'all okay with going on this journey with me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So so, you know, you're very powerful women. When you show up in a room, you know, explain to us how that is, how it is for you to show up in probably a male-dominated room and you having your voice, being a Black woman, all aspects of you. Talk to us so we can understand what that looks like and what that feels like for you as a Black woman. And anyone can start.
I'll go. I'll say, you know, once again, kind of growing up with that, the foundation, you know, of love from family and definitely being, I was very churchy, very religious. So
Mhm.
having that foundation, you know, I had confidence in who I was.
Okay.
Not to say that I was always the kind of kid, although I did stick up for kids, I was kind of quiet myself. But my point was if there was a need to do something, I had no problem stepping up to do that.
Right.
And so there was still that shy aspect. And I recall when I kind of found my voice, it was funny and I didn't feel, you know, so timid about speaking up. I was like, well, I found my voice and I'm good. People gonna hear it and they're gonna get sick of hearing me talk. But, you know, you do go through that process. But I will say, obviously, along the journey, there are moments where you do, you know, appear in rooms and you are the only one. So,
Right.
for instance, when I first started my career out of law school, obviously being a lawyer at the time was very male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my class was at my law school was kind of seeing a shift that the nation was seeing at the time where there were more and more females coming into law school.
That's right.
And so the tide was starting to change, but we
Right.
weren't there yet. So the world I showed up in was still very male dominated with regard to who was sitting on the bench,
Mm-hmm.
my opposing counsel, the law type of law I practiced, you know, the interpreters. It was just male. Sometimes I'm the only female in the courtroom. And then you're Black, right, as well. So although you have that confidence, you understand how people perceive you.
Right.
And how you show up. And so you have to account for that. So there were times where, you know, lawyers who are much older than me, they were running over me, you know, they're talking over me, etc. And then, you know, because you're this looking at you, this little kid, little Black girl, although I'm sitting at counsel table, the judge isn't controlling his courtroom. That's
Right. That's the judge's responsibility.
So once again, I'm kind of reserved until I need
to
show up and say something. So I'm gonna give you a couple chances, but
Right.
then it's like, excuse me, may I, you know, judge, I have something to say. Judge, are you going to control counsel? So now I'm taking over your
right.
courtroom.
You're directing the judge.
Exactly, I'm directing because at this point you're not directing it. So I think, you know, I kind of grew into being comfortable in different rooms, but at the same time, you know, there are still situations that you walk into and you go, okay, how am I going to adjust in here,
Right.
or how I'm going to move through this room? You know, a commissioner pointed me to this bank board, and so I'm sitting at this board, and so you can imagine, I am the only one in the room.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting in my head last week, and I'm like, okay, here we go. I know who's gonna be in this room, but and you do turn it, you know, you turn it on sometimes. You know, I'm comfortable in who I am, but you know, I'm very reserved in this instance. You got to be a little bit more perky, a little bit more interactive. So you push yourself a little bit because you don't want to miss out on those connections and opportunities to learn about other folks. So you will move a little bit differently in those rooms. So hi, how you doing? Okay, is it? You will kind of,
So
you know,
you're code switching.
Well, you'll say code switching, but it's being perky is a part of who I am. It's just not who I am naturally. I am naturally reserved. Right. So it's not necessarily just in the predominantly white rooms.
Mhm.
It's any room you walk into where you may not know the majority of the people in it. So it's like, here we go. Let me gear up for it. If you're naturally
So
an
let me-
introvert,
let
you
me
have
s-
to gear up for it.
Let me say it a
You have
different
to
way.
gear up for it.
So you adapt.
Yeah.
You adapt.
You-
It's
you
probably
do-
a better word.
You do have to adapt
Right.
and interact with folks. I remember when I just came out of law school and I was serving on the Make-A-Wish board. It's a 30-person board. I'm
Mm.
literally the youngest person in the
Wow.
room. There are hedge fund owners, people who own, national charter schools, partners of law firm. I'm just jumping out of law school, my
Mhm.
first job, and it's a government job. So, it's not all this fancy dancy. But once again, I'm not a person who feels ashamed of who I am and where I come from. I'm very confident. But at the same time, you're trying to understand how you navigate those rooms because there is a perception, like, okay, well, here you are, African American, young, black face. What do you really have to bring to the table? What can you really offer? And I think as have experienced it, that's always kind of the question on the table. What do you have to offer?
The
There's that
unspoken,
question.
the
Yeah, the
unspoken
unspoken question, right? That other folks don't have
Right.
to answer. It's like they belong there,
Right.
right? And I don't feel like I have to prove why I'm there, but sometimes, honestly, you will feel like, well, let me speak up. Let me say something, like at my meeting the other day, so folks understand who I am, that I do belong here, what I do. No, it's seriously. And then
No, I
you
know.
do. Sometimes you do.
But I want to talk to you. I want you to express, because I'm sure there's a young professional out there, a woman, or even for those who may not be women, to understand what it feels like.
Hmm.
I mean, to have to go through that.
Yeah.
And if you have to go through that repeatedly, what is that like for you? What does it feel like?
Well, it feels, you're tensed up.
Mm.
It obviously doesn't feel good. You feel as if, folks are looking at you as if you are less than when you walk into the room, even though you know you're not.
Mm.
So you have to say, although I know I'm not less than, how do I maneuver in this room?
Exactly.
And so it's not a good feeling. I tense up a little bit before I say, you know what? Look, I know who I am. Let me roll through this. But and it puts you on the defensive, and then you have to deal with the other. You're an angry black woman. I'm not an angry black woman. I'm speaking up for myself, and some folks can see that advocacy and perceive it how they'd like to, but it does force you to have to show up a little bit, like when I mentioned in the courtroom, a little bit more forceful, a little bit more, assertive, if you will.
Because they take notice.
Because
They,
that's how people take
they take notice. I've seen it. I've seen you do it.
Yeah.
So I know that there's a difference. Folks who don't know you may make assumptions.
Yeah.
And then, they find out.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the other part to that, but they
But I'll say this, Ruben. I find with time, especially if you're going into the same rooms, folks end up really respecting you.
Well, yeah.
And who you are and what you bring, because now they understand. So I think with time, folks do understand, oh, no, we understand what she brings, whether it was in the courtroom and judges relying on you and understanding, no, she knows what she's doing. She knows. But my point is, as Black folks in this world in America,
Right, in this environment,
it's
right.
all that we all go through that initial feeling where folks are kind of like, what are you really bringing? Mm-hmm. Why are you here?
Right.
How did you get here?
This is true, but it's different for Black women.
No, absolutely.
It's different for Black women. I want to make sure we're clear about that.
No, I agree with you.
Yeah, so one of the things that I like is that what happens is they see the surface you. And then when you really, make your voice be heard, then they understand. And then when you deliver,
right,
then they really get it, right?
Right.
And I'm sure both of you can speak to that. Val, you want to speak to this as well?
Yeah, I will. It's very interesting. I've always been very comfortable in any spaces that I'm invited to.
Okay.
And I will say that's a gift.
Right.
Now, how I act in those spaces depends on, it depends on the day. Because some days I could be defensive about it. Some days I'm very coy. Some days I'm satirical about it. Mm-hmm. So it really is how you come at me is what you get back. And the beautiful thing is I have found a way to navigate in such a way that you almost end up questioning yourself about why you're questioning me. and how
Mm.
I respond.
Mhm.
Because I'm very much, if somebody says to me, oh, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, so I
Right.
get this sometimes. Oh, you went to the University of Pennsylvania? Yeah. Why are you asking? Oh, I'm just asking. Well, no. Why are you asking? Oh, you mean like the one in Philadelphia? Yes. Like, well, what other University of Pennsylvania
Pennsylvania,
is it? Oh,
right?
well, well, I'm just asking. Well, how did you get in?
Oh, really?
Oh, I get that. And so I was like, well, what do you mean? How did I get in? So what happens is if I'm in that kind of mood, that's what you get. So you end up in this circle thing of questioning where you're almost questioning yourself.
Right.
And then they just stop it. Now, if I'm in the other defensive move, I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, why are you questioning my right to have gone to the University of Pennsylvania?
Right.
That's what the CV says. And so it depends on how I'm feeling that morning is what you get. Because when I walk into a room, I already feel like I have a right to be there.
Mhm.
Right.
And so I don't usually tense up. I kind of go, okay, fine, just bring it on.
Mhm.
I've gotten to the point where it doesn't even bother me anymore because since middle school, having gone to programs for what they call bright children, you sit there and you're the only one. And so I'm used to those kinds of questions. What stops me sometimes is I'm very reserved. So I don't really necessarily want to have to every day when I
Yeah.
sit in the room
Exactly.
to tell you who I am because I'm not asking you that. Nobody else is being asked that. So if the bio says this, I've even said to people, read the bio.
Wow.
Mhm. Mhm.
Or somebody would go, oh, well, what do you do? I'm like, I don't define myself by what I do.
Right.
So
Right.
it really
Right.
does depend on how you
Right.
come at me,
Right.
what you get from me.
Right.
Another situation I had where a man says to me, oh, you're from North Philly. You're not from North Philly. I don't see you like North Philly. And so there I came in with a little bit more of an attack
Right.
because what he was saying was,
Mhm.
I like you. I see something different in you. I've already checked the box off for you. How dare you be from North Philly?
Right. Right.
So I came at him in a very different way, much more of, well, what's wrong with people from North Philly?
Mhm.
Right.
I am from North Philly. I am
Right.
that I am. I'm my people. Are you saying something about my people? So it really does depend on how I wake up and what Valerie you're going to get and what I think you mean by your question.
Right.
Because sometimes it is, hey, Valerie, how you doing? What do you do for a living? And other times it's like, why are you in this room?
Exactly.
Right.
Like, what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
What did you do to get here?
Right.
So I just match energy.
Mhm.
And my best thing is when I leave somebody thinking that I shouldn't be in the room, and you can see it in their eyes that they start to question themselves and they just walk away.
Right.
Mhm.
Or when they ask somebody else,
Right.
and then they get confirmation that no, she really needs to
Right.
be in this room.
Yeah.
So the thing is, the reason why I ask this is because we go into rooms, and when you are from a different group
Mhm.
than the groom, and the leaders always in mixed company. It seems like we have to constantly define ourselves, for others. And if our definition isn't comfortable for them, then that's where the rub is.
Mhm.
I had an experience once, and I'll tell you where we have to define ourselves once. When it comes down to contracting, for business folks, I'm going to tell you right now,
Mhm.
when it comes down to contracting, there are two prices.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes three. And I want y'all to speak to this, okay? And when you are of a certain persuasion, whether ethnic group, gender, whatever, a lot of times you get lowballed. What they're willing to pay
Yes.
looks different because of how you look. And so I'll never forget it. I was actually working at the time, and there was this big project that came up. And everybody, I'm the only brother there, and everybody in the room was getting raises.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
I got a title,
Sounds
right?
familiar.
I got a
Mhm.
title. So when the CEO says to me, he says, we don't have, because we're, spreading this wealth, we really don't have enough to share with you and this, that. I said, well, who's doing the lion's share of the work? I said, because you can't do what you're doing without me doing my part.
Mhm.
He says, well, you're right. You're right that you are contributing a lot to this. And I say, well, if I'm contributing that way, I should be compensated in that manner. And if I can't be compensated in that manner, then I guess I can't do the work. So the whole room got silent. I'm at the table
Of course.
with all of these folks.
Mhm.
The whole room got silent. And so this guy was very clever. My boss, very clever. And he liked me because I spoke my mind. That's the other thing. When you speak your mind, they like you. So he says, you know what, Reuben, you got a point. We have to make sure that we compensate you for what you do. He said, you have great negotiating skills. And my reply was, I learned from the best.
Mm.
I learned by watching you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about this, because when we talk about navigating challenges, let's talk about using this example about how the pricing differs when you walk in the room and what those challenges are. How do you navigate? How do you pivot? I want you all to cover all of that. So Val, I'll start with you, and you tell me
as
about
a
that.
business consultant, that happens a great deal.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you put scopes of work together, you know what your value is. And I'll give you two situations. One is, it was a $20,000 contract. I was willing to do it for this group for 12 because I believed in their mission. And part of the way I live my life is do good and make good.
Right.
And I said, okay, fine. I'll do 12.
Mm-hmm.
And I told them, this is normally 20, showed them everything. I will do it for you for 12. You'll get 100% of the work. I'm not going to cut corners. So they came back and asked me, could I do it for 8?
Mm.
And I said to them, absolutely not. I said, because when you scoped this work, you knew this was going to be somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000
Right.
for whomever did it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, I will do it for 12, no less. And if you can't hire me, I'm okay with that. So then they said, well, we don't have that much money. We thought you could do it for 8. And then they had a nerve to come back to me and said, what would be your fee to come pitch the proposal and the project to our team? And maybe the team can do the work instead of us giving you the contract.
Oh, wow.
And I said to her, ma'am, you don't know me very well, but Harriet Tubman, who is my alter ego, is going to speak for me right now. And I joke about that because I tell everybody, even when I was a kid, Harriet Tubman was my alter ego. So
Right.
when the shy, introverted, reserved side of me needs to stay in check, Harriet comes out. So I said to her, you may not understand this here, but Harriet wants me to tell you Whitney Houston H to the no. And that was my response.
That's funny.
And that literally, and I knew it left her baffled because I didn't explain what Whitney Houston H to the no meant. I made it seem like I had an alter ego that Harriet was. I didn't tell it was Harriet. Yeah, I didn't tell it was Harriet Tubman. I just left it at that. I said, it is no way, Val.
Right.
And then my response, I never forget, this was in the third person. It is no way Valerie can do that for $8,000.
Right.
Mm.
Because when I conjured in Harriet,
So
she was speaking for me.
Right.
And she's like, well, okay, we'll take a look at it and we'll call you back. I never heard from her, and I was okay with that.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And then the second time was with a client. I was raising my prices, my hourly consulting rate,
Mm-hmm.
because I was working on a project with one of my other clients, and their attorney raised their rate from $900 an hour to $1,200 an hour. And as you said, guess who was doing most of the work?
Mm-hmm.
Because I had said to my client, if I do the work and send it to the attorney in a summary format, that means you're saving $900 an hour, and based on my rate. And then when he went to $1,200, they didn't blink.
Right. Not at all.
They
So
don't
with
work with us.
Not at all.
And that was my point.
Not at all.
I said, well, you're not going to blink with the attorney.
Right.
And I'm saving you $600 to $900 per hour by working with the attorneys. I need to raise my rate. And then I started to look overall at the value that I was adding to my clients. And I thought I was just undervaluing myself. So one of my clients said, well, then if you're going to raise your rate, we won't be able to use you anymore. And I said, no problem. 9 months later, 10 months later, I think I got a call from them saying, hey, look, the project that we were working on, we still haven't been able to finish. Would you come back on at the old rate?
Didn't somebody say yesterday's rate? It's not today.
Yesterday's price is not today's price, right?
Yeah. And so
exactly.
And I vacillated. So when I need to make tough decisions, rather than stand in my feelings, I said, you know what, let me call you back. Let me give it some thought. I was working with you for years. I said, let me give this some thought and some consideration. I knew I was going to stick to my new rate.
Right.
but I didn't want to come across as offended
Right.
because she
Of
had a
course.
right to ask. I have a right to
Yeah.
say no.
Right.
Exactly.
So when I
Okay.
called her back, I said, no, my new rate is my new rate. I said, my company has decided that it needed to raise the rate. Now, I am the CEO.
Right.
I'm the managing director. I'm the everything. But I said, my company has
think you should
decided that we
cover.
needed to increase the rates. And so I stuck to my guns. And I ended up getting the contract, and they ended up signing and working with
Oh,
me for
nice.
another year.
Nice.
So
Very
Of
nice.
course, I want you to speak, but I want to just address what you're saying. So they understand, and I've seen you. We worked on a project together down south. Same thing, where you did a lot of the preliminary work, and had it gone through an attorney or real estate attorney specifically, what they would have paid, is so much higher than what
Mhm.
you offered them. And so one of the things again, understanding your worth for business folks, understanding your worth and knowing how to negotiate, how to pivot, how to negotiate. So Valerie gave us a very good example of how she took a beat, and came back, but stuck to her rate. And this is important. You have to understand, especially when you deliver a quality service or you have a quality product, whatever type of business you're in, to make sure that you advocate for yourself, so that you can make sure that you can meet your needs. You have other folks out there that basically the attorney, and I don't know your situation, just has to rubber stamp it after you've done the work. You know what I mean?
But they have to legalese it too.
Yeah, right. But, just basically, in their compensation is much different. So one of the things I want to make sure that you understand is that this is so very important for us in business and advocacy. So not just about the community, but also for ourselves. So, Shaheewa, I want to give you a chance
yes.
to address.
Let me tell you. So I'll admit, while in my legal, because when I left, my federal government work after 18 years, I started my own firm. So I don't really have much issues with the pricing there. I will admit. But I work with my husband. We have a family business, because like I said earlier, he was like, I'm going to start a business. So he did, and we celebrated 10 years of that business being, strong and growing in January of this year. But I will tell you, we talk about it between the two of us, but also with my chamber members who go after contracts, whether it be city, county, state, etc. And we call it the black tax. That's what we call it. And we laugh about it, but we all mad about it because we call it the black tax. So in our line of work, with government contract, you do a lot of research. You want to understand who had the contract prior. We want to understand pricing. You study your competitors. So you understand your worth and what you bring to the table, but obviously you want to be within a range because then you're automatically out. So we're doing all this research up front, and then you get to the table and you're like, well, this is the price. You were paying a company, specifically the contract that we had to fight like an extra 6 months to get our vote, right? Finally got in, and I didn't think we were going to get it, but I was like, we're going to fight because we're not going to let any other black company coming after us be treated the way we were. So we were definitely going to fight. And I told myself, we may not get it, but this is what we're going to do. We ended up getting the contract, and so now we're talking about pricing. The prior company was getting paid almost $250,000. And, we get paid a lot of commission. So there are other commissions that we're getting. They were getting, we knew. And we walk in and it's like, we want to expand the scope from the RFP that I bid on. So first they wanted to expand the scope.
Right.
So at first you kind of wanted a consultant, but now it was like, no, we don't really want a consultant. We want a broker because we want you to do all of these things that brokers would do. It's like, but that wasn't the RFP. So that's the first problem, expanding the scope. And then now there's a problem. We can't, it's just a no-go on getting paid what the other broker was getting paid. Although we were going to be doing...
Increasing the work.
Yeah, we're increasing the work. And we were more than capable, we're more hands-on, et cetera. And so there's this now push and pull because once again, like I was saying, the perception of what you're worth because of who's walking in the room. You're black. And so that's why we talk about this black tax. Automatically, when you walk in the room, slash that down, slash that price down, because I'm black. And it's like, no, we have more education. that we're bringing to the table, not commiserate, but
Right.
more. Just as good experience. And actually had experience with that client because my husband served as a consultant with that
Right.
very client beforehand. So they understood the caliber of the work, but you're fighting that notion that you're worth less.
Right.
And that's what obviously pees us off, but you have to push back and say, well, no. And it is a balance because for some folks, when you're just starting out, you want that opportunity to get your foot in the door, to get your first government contract. So you may go a little bit lower than you normally would. And I get that. To get your foot in the door, and then you work in annual increases, and obviously if there's work not in the scope, you charge for that. So I understand that there may be some pivoting and negotiating that happens there. And I will say, I'm the fighter. My husband was like, look, we trying to get in. What we got to do. So we did go down a bit, but there was some work that, because they didn't expand the scope to the part where they were anticipating some of the services, there were some things that we got to invoice for. But I do tell my members, understand your worth. Study like pricing, competitors, etc. Kind of say, okay, they have that education, I have that, so that you're pricing yourself in a solid place so that you feel very comfortable saying, no, this is where I am because of X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And so I know what you're going to get. And you're actually going to get a little bit above and beyond what you were getting before, as a matter of fact. So that's why you should pay this price. But it's a very real thing. And not just with, our Caucasian brothers and sisters,
Right.
but with our own.
Right.
Because our first fight was with our own.
Right.
And because if, once again, understanding that people will project onto you.
Right.
Right. So you don't think you're worth, because you can't look at me and say, I'm not
Right.
worth what you were paying someone else. If you know you're valuable and you're worthy and you're where you're supposed to be and you're secure in who you are. And unfortunately, as entrepreneurs, you're going to be dealing with folks who may be in salaried positions who don't, one, understand entrepreneurship. So that's a conversation I have with my entrepreneurs as well. They're salaried. So I have to say to people sometimes when we're, negotiating, we understand that we have expenses that you don't have.
Exactly.
So all this money you want to count up to how many dollars and cents that I'm getting, some of that is overhead. We have actuaries that we have to pay, as well as a few legal fees, because I don't do labor law. So we'll do, partner with someone to do that. But actuaries are not cheap. And we want to be precise with regard to the, guidance that we're providing you. So, there are other expenses that we have. So it's trying to, traverse that understanding that, hey, you have a salary. We are a company. Because they will want to nickel and dime you once again. But I do believe it comes down to, unfortunately, valuing Black businesses, right? Valuing the expertise, the training, and the value that they're bringing to you. And that's just looked upon differently by some people. Some people it's not. And we've had very good experiences where we've been able to negotiate accordingly, got the price we deserve, etc. But there are instances where you may have to pivot. You talked about pivoting and come in lower, and then the price does get higher as you're in there. And we've been able to do that and kind of recapture some of that. But it's a very real thing. And, we try to prepare our entrepreneurs as best for them so they understand going into it, to expect it, and then to plan accordingly for how they're going to address it.
So this is the thing that really bothers me. And you said it, and then this is how we're viewed by some. I'm a business person.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to, when you see a white business person, you don't put white business.
I agree.
Right.
Why do we always have to put, Black in front of it? You know what I mean? Even though I am that,
Right.
I'm not denying my Blackness, but why do we have to put that in? Understand that you're hiring me for my services, my work that I'm doing. One of the things that I think I know from you guys and your work and myself as well, I knew I had to establish a track record.
Mm-hmm.
And once you establish a track record, then folks know when you come in, you're going to come in just like any other business that does the same work that you do.
Right.
And so now that conversation changes. But in the beginning, well, for me, they know I'm not lowballing. I'm not lowballing.
Right.
I'm coming in, and I'm coming in higher a lot of times than what they're usually paying for the services that I provide. And
I see.
I mean, I don't know because of the field that I'm in, but they get it. So that's just how it is for me. That's been my experience. I can only speak to that.
Right.
But I see the looks on your faces, so tell me about it.
Look here, Ruben. Real talk. It is a battle out here for our businesses. And yes, with all that's going on with DEI, et cetera, I've said to my businesses, I said, don't hang your head down low. We're businesses first. And we get that. We understand that. And so we have to speak to, once again, the value that we bring, increasing the bottom line, the very innovative, solutions that we bring. And the fact that a lot of these folks, although they may say on the outside, oh, it's, anti-DEI, and they're, not trying to, quote unquote, get in trouble, whether it be on a federal level or, in the very state that we're in, there's a lot of vitriol around race and gender. And so people are tiptoeing. But if we're operating in business, folks understand their bottom line. They understand who their customer base is. They understand they have to speak to that customer base. So at the end of the day, yes, we are businesses, but we live in a world and we live in a country. So maybe in your field, my darling, because of your track record, but we have a very good track record. We saved one client $5 million.
I know.
That last broker was not going to do that because that means your commission goes down. Whereas we want to do the right thing because what do we know? Because you'll keep us for another 5 and 10 and 15 years. And so the longevity of the relationship is important. And besides that, excellence is the standard. We show up and we want to be our best. And so that's why we're showing up the way we do. But it's a struggle for us because in our field, to be honest with you, I know maybe one other Black-owned company in the state of Florida that does what we do.
Oh, wow.
So when we go in, it's the older white gentlemen with high school education who we're competing against, who don't come with anything innovative to save money, to increase the health and wellness of their employee population, nothing. But because they understand, they have families and they can relate to the fact that they have families they need to feed and they must live a certain lifestyle. And because I want to live that life. So I understand that. So then they're not counting their pockets. But we come in, it's, they don't need that much. Now all of a sudden you count the dollars and the cents for me when you didn't for them because of that perception. We don't need that much. It shouldn't take that much. You don't necessarily deserve that much. Although once again, you have the great track record and the experience plus the additional education that, that comes with it. That's important. So it's a fight out here, Ruben. I don't know.
I want to come to you, but you just brought something to mind. That same position that I talked to you about earlier. We were in a situation where there were folks that were from a different country. And they didn't have all of their credentials in this country. And they wanted to have a salary commensurate to my salary, right?
See that?
And so in the meeting, in my presence, this is something similar to what you just said. The executive director says, even though the credentials aren't current, we need to ensure that this person gets compensated this way. And so I was working there at the time. My supervisor says, well, what about these other folks who have the credentials? And these folks who had the credentials happen to be Black. The CEO says, well, certain people are used to struggle.
Do you see?
They are used to struggle. So as if this other person who didn't get the credentials that they needed to have, these people who had their credentials needed to suffer.
Exactly.
Because this person is not used to struggle.
Oh, no.
So
Isn't that weird how people's minds work?
Yes, but it was like they said it and didn't even catch what they were saying because he didn't mean.
There's no reason to catch it.
Talk to me, man. Talk to me, man.
Well, there are a couple of things that you said in that, and I'm going to go back to also as women.
Right.
Even if you've performed well the last time,
Right.
it's almost like you're starting from the beginning this time.
Right.
And so when you say you've performed well and you almost can walk into the door with a performance record,
Right.
oftentimes, particularly when you're looking at the government contracts and we've pitched for some stuff, it doesn't matter what you've done before. They always seem to start us from the gate first.
Right.
They don't even oftentimes look at the performance record. It's like, okay, well, what can you do for me lately? Almost like Janet Jackson.
Right.
And so that's the one part of it. And then as a woman, sometimes when you're on these evaluation teams, they'll look and go, if you're a woman-owned business, does she really need it? Because they assume that there is somebody else that's taking care of you.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you have a male head of household, oftentimes not Black, then they will say, okay, fine, this person needs it.
It needs it. Yeah.
Whether they get the score, whether they have the qualifications, whether they bid at the lowest price, oftentimes you're measured by what they think you need as a Black woman business owner. And so that's the other thing that I tell people sometimes is you've got to realize and it's a shame that we have to do this, you've got to go in better, stronger, oftentimes than your competition and at a lower price. Because sometimes I tell people if you have to go in at a lower price to get in the door, sometimes the differential is your return on investment.
Right.
And so I'm not afraid to go in lower, but you need to know the game because a lot of times we go in thinking we've done everything right, but we don't know the game. And that's why I tell entrepreneurs when you're going in and you have to bid for something or go after something, know the game so you can be the strategic best when you're performing. So yeah, I agree with you, but we sometimes forget that this is a game.
Yeah.
We and with our own people, see, this is when you talk about advocacy. If I'm sitting at the table, whether I've sat on panels or judging of anything, it is my obligation to speak for the past of my people when they're going after contracts as opposed to be a roadblock. Oftentimes we will sit as the roadblock.
Yes.
So I will go in and tell people, it's hard to talk to people on panels who have never cut a check for themselves.
That's true.
Because cutting your check is a whole different way of living than it is when somebody is giving you a check every 2 weeks. But we need to learn how to be advocates for one another and be that voice when we're sitting on spaces where decisions are made.
But it works both ways. It's not just people who are not of our persuasion. Some people of our persuasion don't think we deserve to make that kind of money.
Right.
They're making an assumption. Why are you paying?
Exactly.
Why are you paying them this money?
Yeah.
And like you said, you have to explain to them just the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
So I think again we have to really dissect this. I mean, we can go
I know,
on and on. We can go on and on. But I want to ask you all this. There's been something out there in Shaheewa. I think you wrote about it or spoke about it about how often the dollar circulates in our community. So one of the things I hear is that you guys are advocating for businesses, for us to, as a community, to thrive, to do better. So you don't see folks out there, living, a life of subsistence. You know what I mean? You want them to have more.
Right.
And part of that includes making sure that dollar circulates in our community. I'd like for both of you to speak on that. I'll go with you first.
Yeah, that's something that I looked at early when I was doing research for the chamber, and kind of was not really shocked, but to see that the dollar in the Black community circulated about 6 hours because we get paid, and then we're probably buying something to eat, paying that car note, paying for a home, or paying for somebody else's outside, paying. Well, not many of us own the dealerships. We don't have much banks. You're paying a bank for your mortgage. And then, if we want something, because, we want to feel as if we're rewarding ourselves for the lifestyle we live, right? And the hard work, well, I'm going to go buy some brand name, and it's Louis Vuitton, and it's this and that. Especially in this social media filled world that we're in now. We have to, show everybody. Whereas other communities understand, the need to spend with each other. So I was looking at some of the other statistics. I think for the Asian community, It was about 3 weeks. So they get paid. They're spending the Asian dry cleaner, the Chinese restaurant, and the Chinese grocery store. So everything is staying. And then Chinese bank. We have one here in Sunrise. So that plaza is filled with Chinese-owned businesses. And so they're sitting there paying each other. Even the fast food restaurants are owned by the Asians in that area. And so that dollar is circulating within community and then goes off into their community center. So now they're able to build from the businesses that they're building up. They're now able to say, how can we give back and support community and have community centers and other programs and other cultural programs that they can fund themselves. For the Jewish community, I saw that it was about a month. Same concept, right? We're spending with each other. And if any of you, know folks obviously in the Jewish community, they will tell you that's how we spend. We try to spend with each other first. So if I'm hiring a lawyer, I'm looking for a Jewish lawyer, a Jewish accountant, even B2B. Because a lot of folks think I'm spending, my own dollars, right, that I earn as a salary, whatever. I will go out and spend with another Jewish-owned company. But who am I doing business with? With my business. Right? Who are my vendors? And so I remind folks on that angle, it's not just personally, but how are you spending the dollars you bring into your business so you ensure that it circulates? So every other group, including Hispanics, I think it's about 2 weeks the last time I checked, their dollars circulate 2 weeks in their community. But that means that you're building up your community. You're investing in each other's growth and in the future of that community. And that means you're able to reinvest. Right? So now your community doesn't look like the rubble I talked about earlier. Right. You can now own, some buildings and fix them up and have, your own housing, your own schools, businesses that are able to provide jobs and internships and other opportunities so that we're now economically supporting each other. And with us spending more than, good Lord, the last time I checked, we were spending more than Ireland as a community. Yeah. We're spending more than some nations spend each year for
our
their goods and
GDP
services.
is up there.
Right. Yeah. So if nations are spending, less than us to run an entire country, we can collectively understand the power in that spending. And I think we have in the past. I mean, if you all remember the Bank Black movement.
Right.
When I know the bank in Miami talked about getting millions of dollars within that short period of time that they'd never seen before, all the deposits.
Right.
But they turn around and counsel people on how to own homes and give loans so folks can get homes. And that boosts home ownership, equity, wealth, etc. So we have to think beyond that purchase of, I'm going to look fly and, Louis and all of that. We have to think, how can we build each other up?
So I agree with you 100%. And Val, I'm going to give you the opportunity to address this. But one of the challenges, and I want you all to address this too.
Yeah.
A couple of the challenges is that we have been raised to be consumers, right? Mm-hmm. These other groups that you talk about were raised to be owners, right? And there's a different mindset of that. And because some have been owners much longer, then they built the wealth. They built the legacy. They built the wealth. I think we are coming into our own in terms of ownership now. I think we have more folks of our persuasion who are owners now. The challenge is, even with our own banks, I put money in the Black Bank, but I can't do all of my banking, because they're limited in what they offer. And I hope that more of us can put money in those banks so that they can expand their services, that sort of thing. But one of the things that I think that we really need to get to is to begin to become more owners, because once we are able to own more, then we can do the B2B. We can make sure that there is a business for us besides a restaurant or that sort of thing, that we can circulate our dollars into. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think the blueprint is there. It's just about changing the mindset of being a consumer.
Obviously, our folks were brought over here forcibly, but it's so funny. Even during slavery times, I was reading this book called Free Frank. There were points in time where even enslaved folks could have their own business. Obviously, they were giving the money back to the master and can keep
Right.
only allowed to keep a portion of it. But we were always entrepreneurial. All these folks, especially in Florida, talk about, well, we were lucky to be slaves. We learned skills. No, they came and got us because we were civilization builders. We already had the skills. That engineering to have those rice paddy farms, and you and I talked about it in Carolina, they specifically went to certain parts of the continent to get folks who already knew how to do that, right? So my point is, yes, we came through that and had communities here in Durham and obviously in Tulsa, right here locally, that came together because we were in that space together. So you had your doctors, and I get it. No, and I'm saying that, right? So we're forced to
circulate.
Right, forced to rely on each other. So the farmer's food is coming to the Black-owned supermarket, etc. And so now, I understand what you're saying, but I think a part of that is educating folks to say,
Definitely.
look, this is not new to us, right? This is what we have done. We have, this is in our blood, and our people have done it before. Here's how they did it. Here's how they worked together. Here's how they banded together. And yes, as we said, kind of off camera, they always come for it, right? And attack us, etc. in some way. But my point is, we even have survived the attacks. We're still here. We were not meant to, survive the enslavement, right? So my point is, though, with kind of organizing in a collective, is to educate folks to say, yes, you can have your own business, but we still need each other. Exactly. Right? We still need each other. And you still need something here in the chamber that we can provide and help. And there's a way that you can also give back and provide and help. And it's through that collective identity and understanding that we are a collective, that we move forward stronger together. That's just my kind of economic vision for us and cultural vision for us, where we're owning our neighborhoods, we're preserving our neighborhoods, building our communities together collectively.
Awesome. Valerie, you have anything you want to add?
Really quickly, one of the things that has always bothered me is the lack of circulation of the Black dollar.
Yes.
And that's a pain point for me. Mm-hmm. So I do micro spending. And when I say micro spending, I'm not a big spender. I'm kind of a minimalist. Mm-hmm. But I do all of my micro spending to the extent that I can with Black-owned businesses. Yeah. I like to collaborate with Black collaborators. I will bring in somebody on projects, even if I don't need anybody, just to help them work on a bigger project so that they can learn. Now, where I do most of what I would call my outsourced spending to support Black businesses, I will give a scholarship to a kid that's in their last semester of law school, and I know that they can't get to the bar, they can't get to the first job unless the college will say that they've completed their education and that everything is paid off. I will actually go out and seek sometimes students that need that. Or the kid that just says, you know what, I'm at FAMU and I just can't get home for Thanksgiving, but I need a break. I will actually go pay for the kid to go home. So when I talk about, for me, micro spending, while it may not circulate in the community, I believe that it puts something into these young people that hopefully they will come out and go a value add to be a lot more supportive. And where I can, I support Black business. I will source a Black-owned business for everything that I need, insurance, everything first. And then if I can't find it, I go out. And I just call myself a micro spender because I don't spend that much.
Right.
One of my nieces said to me, she thinks I should have a Louis Vuitton bag. I was like, okay, who's the Black pocketbook man that everybody's wearing? And the guy with the T, Telfar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I said, okay, fine. My mother's last name was Taylor. I'll get a Telfar bag, but you can keep the Louis. So that's where I start to spend my money, is at a micro level, and I call it micro spending. And if more of us do that, we could actually bridge up, because I'm hoping if anything comes out of the economy that we're in, it forces us to look at each other to do business.
Of course. It is. It's forcing us to do that right now.
We have to.
And that is my prayer.
Right now, it's forcing us to do that. And the craziest thing is that we are probably, and I travel all around, know you travel all around. Listen, we influence culture globally.
Oh, yeah.
But then the things that we do to influence culture is appropriated. And then again, there's a different price. What we charge or what we receive for what we created is far less than what others who appropriate and then they resell it. So again, I hope that for those who are business folks and those of you who are inclined, there are a lot of gems in this podcast. I hope you guys are getting it. And I want you to understand it's not about us being anti anyone. It's all about us being pro who we are and making sure that we are supporting our community, making sure that we're giving solid information about how you succeed. So make sure you be mindful and intentional about how you spend those dollars in your community. Make sure that you're mindful and intentional about how you are doing the work in your community. If you're doing quality work, you get quality pay. Want to make sure that you are, just being intentional about your advocacy in the community. If we're building, a rising tide raises all ship. If we're building our community, we become stronger together, as Shaheewa said. And then what happens then is that we move to the next level. And I think we're there, folks. I really feel that we're there. I think that we're being forced to be there right now. And I'm excited about what the future holds, because when we go back to that community spirit and leave the individual mindset out, but making sure that we can build community. That's why you have the Broward County Black Chamber. That's why you have the work that Valerie does. That's why you have the work that we do. So we are stronger together. We're going to do great together. I want you all to say some final words, anything that you want to say before I close out the show today.
I'll start by saying this, what I'm telling my members now. Although the clouds may seem dark and you may feel very stressed and burdened, I too, Ruben, am excited, because that means there's so much opportunity for us to build together, build our own distribution systems, build new streams of income for ourselves. We need to understand that as people of color, the world is ours to build.
That's right.
The connections are ours to have and to grow. So feel hopeful in this time, because there's never a time that we didn't survive and come through.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, Shaheewa, I am building hope. No, and the reason why I said I'm always a very positive person, but I have never been more despondent in the history in my life, wanting so much for the generations that have coming behind us and not seeing. I am now starting to see it, because the worse that it seems to get, the more I see us gravitating towards like-minded, like-kinded people to be able to grow and build something. And the one thing I'll say, Ruben, I love what you said. This is not about us not liking anybody else.
Right.
Because what I say is, as citizens in the world, what we have always known, when we as a people do better, the country thrives. And I'm hoping that that resonates through us first and then outward to the country, so that we all can thrive. But I'm working on the hopefulness. I'm doing some work for the next 3 months, and it is building that hope for a future that I know we can have, and only praying that we get there sooner than later.
Very good.
Listen, ladies, I want to thank you both for gracing me with your presence and gracing the audience with your presence. I mean, it was definitely a very thought-provoking conversation that we had. And listen, folks, we could have went a lot deeper than we than we did.
So
This
many
is
things.
this is the PG version, but maybe in the next season we'll dive a little deeper. Listen, if you like this podcast, if you enjoy watching and what you heard today, we ask that you like and share the conversations with Ruben. We want to make sure that you go to your podcast, and it's available on all platforms. And if you enjoyed this episode, we ask that you like, share, and subscribe to share this conversation with Ruben. Until next time, thank you for joining me today on Share This Conversations with Ruben. I hope that this conversation inspired you today and gave you something that will help you while you're on your leadership journey. I offer consulting and leadership development services through RER Consulting, designed to help leaders grow with clarity and confidence. You can learn more by contacting me at rer-consulting.com. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share. Also, leave a comment. Your comment may inspire some future leader. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.
That's when we come together to set the world on fire, fire, fire.